Almost 10 years ago now, I woke at around 5 AM with the express intent to do only one thing: play through the entirety of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood before my birthday ended. I remember the exact feeling, the butterflies of opening the package, the goosebumps seeing the menu screen, the absolute awe of entering the world of what I consider Ubisoft's best game. Yes, less than a decade ago, Ubisoft was standing at the peak of the video games industry, being widely considered one of the most consistently great developers and publishers on the market, whether it be Assassin's Creed, Rayman, Tom Clancy, Farcry 3, Splinter Cell, Prince of Persia, even Just Dance to a certain extent. This company was known for trailblazing the entire medium of games, continuously innovating new ideas, bringing incredible stories to life, and pioneering the boom of open world games. But in 2020, this once great company is considered far from what they were. Creatively bankrupt, morally bankrupt, and in recent years nearly financially bankrupt. Ubisoft went from a video game Goliath to a punching bag for YouTubers and critics everywhere. And I believe that this downturn can be traced back to a single year. A year so disastrous that it completely overturned the company in nearly every way. Before we get into the video, it'd really help me out if you could hit like, and also if you're new here, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on. And with that being said, let me explain how 2014 broke Ubisoft. It began with E3, as so many things do, but we need to go back to E3 2012 to see where this first major issue stemmed, as Ubisoft announced Watch Dogs, a new, soon-to-be revolutionary IP with graphics unlike anything anyone thought was possible. The first gameplay demo for Watch Dogs didn't just make waves in the industry, it made a tsunami, as the 2-year wait for Ubisoft's supposed counter to GTA just continued to build an unfathomable amount of hype. Ubisoft took a massively overdone genre, that of a modern day open world shooter, and put a genuinely unique and interesting spin on it, truly making the player part of the world, interweaving the world with every gameplay system. But not only was Watch Dogs conceptually fantastic and innovative, it was also gorgeous. From everything we saw, this looked like the true next generation of games, the true leap between consoles that we all expected. But instead of getting this, we got this. The instant it released, it was clear that this game had some major issues, but most major of said issues was its downgrades. Despite being the highest selling product from Ubisoft at the time, Watch Dogs released to mass controversy, and in some cases hatred, as this massively hyped 2-year wait had led to nothing less than a letdown, and one of the biggest letdowns in recent memory at that. Although in a vacuum, the game itself is by no means bad, the way it had been marketed, the expectations the company themselves had put on it, it was too much, and we saw the first sign of Ubisoft cracking. But despite being seemingly unbeatable, Ubisoft somehow released another AAA game this year that had even more controversy. Yes, I'm once again talking about Assassin's Creed Unity. Because despite my unrequited love for this beautiful mess of a game, on release that was far from a popular opinion. The game very simply came out completely unfinished. Yet another Ubisoft product that's hype was incomparable, being a near universal disappointment with its ridiculous amount of bugs, its glitches, its terrible frame rates, its awful draw distance, and its lackluster story. Which, by the way, I just rewrote, so if you want to go check that out, link in the description and in the card, whatever side of the screen it's on. You'd think I know this by now. 2 major AAA games filled to the brim with innovation going into next gen. 2 absolute critical bombs. This year was an absolute disaster, and its consequences would be felt for years to come. As after this turning point for the company, they had 2 paths to go down. Accept these failures, but continue to adapt. Continue to build on what they were making. Continue to innovate. You can probably guess that that's not what they went with. Over 2015, they of course released the abysmal Assassin's Creed Syndicate, a game that was in the works for years, and after the absolute disaster of Unity's launch, it was clear that the public had lost interest in the company's biggest franchise, with the game selling nearly half the copies of its predecessor. So that left Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege and The Division as just about their only moneymakers for 2015. And with the combined downgrades of The Division and the rough launch of Rainbow, it seemed Ubisoft's checkbooks were drying up. Meanwhile though, there was another game that dropped in 2015. A game that not only shattered sales charts, but also expectations. A game that transcended the entire genre. The Witcher 3. a game which many have labelled as the absolute peak of the RPG and of open world games as a whole. And so Ubisoft took their second option. Do as little as possible to regain as much revenue that their past failures lost. They took a year off from Assassin's Creed, and in 2016, we saw the last glimmer of hope that was spawned at E3 all those years ago, as they finally released a sequel to Watch Dogs. And I mean, they released Watch Dogs 2. Do I really need to say any more? It was time for Ubisoft to reinvent themselves, and as a new logo came in for the company, we saw them making the decision to latch on to what seemed to be the future of games. E3 2017, after years of speculation, Ubisoft revealed Assassin's Creed Origins, an action open world game with many added RPG elements. This was the beginning of the end. Because while on release, Origins garnered good to great reviews by many, it was a path to Ubisoft homogenizing their games, as after this Assassin's Creed test run, Ubi saw that this RPG process worked. Who needed creativity? Why invest money and effort to innovate, to push the industry forward, when instead you can latch your past success onto growing trends and make just as much profit? So with the release of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, we saw an even further push into the RPG realm. With dialogue and character choices, this game was advertised to be your Odyssey, to warp around whoever the player may be, and it did far from what was advertised. Regardless of the fact that the game completely shat over the series it was named after, regardless of the fact that it often didn't fit into lore or have any type of coherent story, Odyssey was, in simple terms, a terrible RPG. Ubisoft had jumped full force onto the bandwagon without having the skills to do so, and so they released one of the most shallow, uninteresting, soulless, inconsistent, broken AAA RPGs of the entire decade. And it worked. Sure, it gave you the option to be gay before forcing your character to have a heterosexual relationship. Sure, it gave you endings that were tonally scattered and entirely unsatisfying. Sure, it provided enemies that acted as little more than damage sponges. Sure, it near forced the player to buy microtransactions to simply be a high enough level to beat the story. But it sold. It sold a lot. And for a brief fleeting moment, it seemed Ubisoft were back on top. At least that's what you think from the financial reception. But then, just 2 weeks later, Red Dead Redemption 2 released, and it reminded us all what a truly great game was. A game with passion behind it, a game with years of blood, sweat and tears behind it, a game filled to the brim with genuine soul, from a company that stayed a Goliath for 2 decades. It reminded us all that Ubisoft weren't making games anymore. They were making products based on trends built on better games than they can say they've ever made. For a while in the early 2010s, it was other companies stealing ideas from Ubisoft. It was other companies taking inspiration from the likes of Farcry 3 and Assassin's Creed. It was other companies jumping on trends built from the passion of Ubisoft devs like Patrice Désilets. But at the end of the day, when 2014 hit, when the cards were on the table, Ubisoft showed their true colours. No interest on building, no interest in innovating. So after this minor success, it was decided that Ubisoft would completely homogenize all of their major franchises. Whether it be Far Cry 5 or Ghost Recon, every game would become an open world action RPG. Or if that couldn't be applied, then they take on another industry trend. Just look at their most recent release, Hyperscape, a battle royale clearly built off the boom of Fortnite. But again, Ubisoft were too late. Because here's the thing, when you build games, films, any media, any art off of the back of trends or fads, they'll never last, and they'll often be too late. They'll never stand as anything more than brief moneymakers. They'll never stand above the crowd as genuine game changers, as industry icons. They'll never be anything more than passable. The only reason Ubisoft can make Assassin's Creed Odyssey sell 10 million copies is because 10 years ago, they made a series of games that transcended trends, that stood out as unique, that innovated, that was great. But when you make every game an open world RPG, or a battle royale, when you make every game with the express intent to capitalize on trends, neither you or the games will last in anyone's mind for very long. There's a reason people still talk about the likes of LA Noire, Batman Arkham Asylum, GTA San Andreas, Fallout New Vegas, Skyrim and The Witcher 3. I'm of the belief that truly great art, whether it be games, movies, music, whatever, truly great art is timeless. Truly great art can't age. Ezio is still the face of Assassin's Creed. Vass is still the face of Farcry. Sam is still the face of Tom Clancy. When you build games off trends, they can never, ever be timeless, and they're usually released years too late. Origins will age, Odyssey will age, Hyperscape will age, but Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood Revelations, Far Cry 3, Prince of Persia Sands of Time, these games, these developers' visions will never be forgotten. Ubisoft will most likely never go back to making truly innovative games. They'll never be what they once were. They are as creatively bankrupt as they are morally reprehensible. And the main reason for that is because they're terrified to try anything new. They're terrified that if they push forward, if they create new IPs, then they'll fail again. They'll have another 2014, another year of disappointment, controversy, and financial disaster. But when it comes to creating art, you can never be afraid to fail, because then you'll never have the gall to ever actually make anything legendary. Legendary, though, is a word that I don't think we'll ever be able to pin on this company again, and I think it all boils down to 1 year, because 2014 truly did, commercially, artistically, and creatively, break Ubisoft. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy, like I said, it would really be appreciated if you could hit like, and also if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on. Also, feel free to tell me what you think of the video down in the comments below, and with all that being said, I've been Joe, aka Found a Scarab, and I'll see you in the next one.